As Far as Anyone Knows is a mostly Latino history podcast where each week your hosts, Minerva Angeles
and Fredo B,
take turns sharing some Latino history,
bad jokes,
and ancestral love. Hello, and welcome to another episode of As Far as Anyone Knows. I'm your host, Minerva Angeles.
And I'm Fredo B.
And we're here to tell you some stories. And today, they're not like super uplifting or anything. They're not even really entertaining. They're just real, and we need to have this conversation.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have it.
Yeah. So originally this episode, I was going to talk about the history of the term Latinx and, our identity. I can't say that word for whatever reason.
Sound like mad New York Latin right now. Identity. Okay.
But regardless, we're gonna push that episode to next week. We had a suggestion. This past week we asked our listeners to give us suggestions about what you guys wanted us to cover on the podcast, and one of the listeners, can't remember.
I'll make sure that person gets credited. Yeah.
Can't remember the person's name at this moment, but they gave us a suggestion that Minerva was going to cover in the coming weeks. But with everything that's been going on in the country, and especially what came to light this past week, I felt it was pressing that we do this episode. So thank you for moving up your research and being prepped to talk about this your topic today.
You're welcome. I feel good about interrupting what we had originally planned to do it. I want to be clear. Like, I have a full-time job outside of this podcast. That is
we both do.
Yes, and it is a very taxing job because it's in nonprofit, and we're starting to kick up into a time of year that gets very busy for us. And you would think that because of COVID that would in fact not be the case for me right now, but it is. So it's a little busy, but and I have the whole two kids or whatever with Fredo. Fredo and I have 2 kids.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to stick to the plans, because there's so much other stuff going on. But we've done this before where something is going on culturally, politically, in the news, and it's just timely to have the conversation and to look back at our history to bring the conversation forward. And so we are going to have a historical conversation about what's going on, but we also are with regard to police brutality, and let's just be clear about that, and not just police brutality, because at this point it's just murder, but with regard to, I think what I would like to get into with a little bit more detail is the history of policing in the United States, and its function originally, because I think it'll help inform what we're seeing today. But that's another day. Today we're just going to talk about other instances, and when or at least one other instance when a tragedy has happened where we've lost a young life at the hands of abuse of power from a police officer. And I know, Fredo, you wanted to start the conversation by paying our respects to Adam Toledo and his family. So you can go on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, it's been weighing heavy on my mind, as I'm sure it has been on a lot of people. it's just a lot going on. We have the case of against Derek Chauvin, the police officer who murdered George Floyd, going on. We have, and then this week, the body cam footage of what took place on March 29th, with Adam, and the police officer who shot him. It originally came out that Adam had a gun in his hand, and the police officer was responding to that. That turned out to be completely false. Adam did not have a gun in his hand. Now, I want to be very clear. I did not watch the footage. Mm-hmm. I'm very much of the mind frame. I don't need to be re-traumatized every single time one of these things happen. I did not watch the murder of George Floyd. I did not watch the murder of this young man either. I'm done watching these videos. I don't need to watch a video to know that it happened. I don't need to watch a video to validate any sort of experience that I'm aware exists. And honestly, I wish people would stop sharing the videos, because, these are human beings. Their families are still grieving. To have to relive that and be re-traumatized themselves over and over every time somebody shares it. And I realized and I acknowledge the reason why people share it, to stir up shock and outrage and all that kind of stuff. But
well, I mean, not with the sole purpose of doing that, but they want some people want the shock and outrage, or to evoke shock and outrage from people by posting videos of these murders, because they want people to really become aware of what's going on and accept the reality of the situation, and nothing is more real than the actual footage. And I would say that if you need to watch a video of a child being shot, or of a man being essentially suffocated to death for 9 minutes, to be convinced that the situation is as grave as it is, then I don't think we ever had you, and I don't think we'll ever have you. I just need, as far as I'm concerned, I've always had enough by knowing that a credible news source is reporting the details of the story to me, and I can read the details of the story and know with confidence, this is what happened. I don't need to watch the video to know, because I've never read an article from a credible news source that gave me inaccurate details of what's in a video that I could pull up myself.
Yeah, and that millions of people have pulled up themselves and have watched to verify, right?
Right.
The body cam footage showed that Adam was complying, because that's the other thing, right? Like, one of the things that people, when things like this happen, people are like, oh, well, if they just complied. Adam was complying. The officer told him to raise his hands, and he did.
Yeah.
And he shot him anyway.
Yeah.
This is rough for me, and I know for you, without disclosing too much about our day lives, but we do work with youth. We are community developers, community activists, but we specifically working, we have long careers working with youth specifically, and youth Adam's age.
Yeah. That's my specialty. I have a degree in Adam's age group. My hands-on experience with kids is almost exclusively with that age group. So I know that age group very well, and I feel very connected to that age group. I feel like I understand what they're going through a lot, just in general. So I know what a boy like Adam must have been going through.
Yeah.
To be in the situation that he was in. Because it is, I mean, we do know he had a gun, and we do know he tossed it.
Yeah, I mean, the facts of the case are still a little, they're murky because of the fact that they lied.
Yeah, they lied, and we had to like sort it out. So
now I'm like I'm questioning everything that you told me.
So the footage shows what appears to look like, because again, it's hard to see in these videos, but it looks something. Like he tossed it. Like just right before he was asked to stop and put his hands up. And then he, from what I understand, again, didn't watch it, but from what I understand, he put his hands up and like when he was asked, and 0.8 seconds, so not even a full second after he was asked to put his hands up,
he was shot. It took one shot to the chest and to extinguish this young person's life. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, why did he have a gun? Why was he out at 3 a.m? Where are his parents?
Yeah, I ain't trying to hear that.
Those are the wrong fucking questions to be asking. If you're asking those questions, you need to take a cold, hard look in the fucking mirror. For real. Like, I'm sorry, but you need to ask yourself, why are you pinning this on a 13-year-old child? He is a child. He was a child.
Or his mom or family or whoever you think is responsible for him, and what you think you know about that person's life that would give you any sort of entitlement to have any kind of opinion about what other people are doing in their lives or with their children. You just don't know. Yeah. You just don't know what's going on with people and what their situation is. And quite frankly, it's none of your business, because the fact of the matter is, under whatever circumstances, anyone who is outside doing anything at all should not be dealing with a cop situation and the cop being your full judge and jury in that moment.
Judge, jury, and executioner.
And executioner in that moment. That's just not the way... That, I mean, of course, if we lived in that country, right? If that was the situation, if what we're being sold is the idea that yes, if the law is, if you go outside, of any person of any age, especially young people, if you go outside at a certain time in the dark,
black,
right,
and brown people,
if you are black and you are brown, if you go outside, the law is we can just shoot you and kill you, and like whatever, right? Then yeah, you know what? That's on him. But since that's not the law, and he has a right to exist in his body wherever he is, you know, whatever he did, and I don't really even know what they were chasing him for, but like whatever he did, like that there's a whole
there's a process
for that.
There's due process, and again, we've seen it time and time again where white young men, go on these shooting sprees, these shooting rampages, or they're attacking police with guns, and they're brought in alive and well and taken extreme care of.
No, pero te lo llevan a Burger King.
Yeah. You know, in the case of Adam, I don't know his circumstances of life. I do know that age group very well, though, because I've worked with that age group for an extensive period of time. They do dumb shit. The best kid will still fucking do something stupid, and you're asking yourself, why would you put yourself in that situation? And you need to go back to when you were 12, 13, 14, and think about the dumb shit that you used to do. Mm-hmm.
And don't look back with your rose-colored glasses of, I got through that, so it didn't happen. A lot of y'all out here, you know, trauma has a very interesting way of erasing itself. Memory loss is a huge part of trauma. So a lot of times we'll look back on a situation and not really remember how it really went down, mostly because you survived that situation. But I guarantee you, there isn't a person walking this earth that doesn't have trauma that they're walking with from their adolescent years. It's just not possible.
Yeah. So
I want to also say, you know, under the circumstances in, you know, this particular case, this comparison to, you know, shouldn't have been out there doing that, shouldn't have been whatever, this is his mom's fault, whatever, whatever. You know, that's on par with saying, you know, you can, a woman was asking to be raped because she was wearing what she was wearing. A woman was asking to be raped because she was drinking too much. A woman was, what was that teen girl's family thinking to let her go to a party? And she got raped at a party because she was sent to a party. Those oppressive ideas, that's how y'all sound like. And don't get me wrong, I want to be clear, let's not get it confused. We take care of the people we love by giving them these limitations, but it's because the world we live in asks us to basically shape our lives around the evil that is, you know, committing these crimes, because we know that the patriarchy and we know that the white supremacist system will not hold these people accountable for what they do.
Yeah.
But that's, and we know it will continue to exist for those reasons. And so that's the best people can do to protect themselves from it. But it doesn't mean someone was asking for it because they happen to find themselves in that situation.
Absolutely. And, you know, well, I want to continue this conversation in the case, specifically in the case of Adam, but I want to be clear that this was not a one-off. This has been going on, you know, for a very long time. So, but Minerva, you're going to talk to us about another pretty, I mean, I don't know if it's famous, but like, it's a well-known case. And again, where police abused their power in a way that I believe this young man was 12 or 13.
That's correct. He was 12. Yeah.
But that you're about to talk about. But I don't know the details of this case, so I'm interested to learn more.
Yeah. The details of this case are pretty really difficult to listen to. So, you know, I mean, we probably should trigger warning this entire episode. So really up to the listener if you are able to handle, you know, the details. If you can't, of course, you do what you need to do for your mental health. We just want to make sure that the education's out there and that people, you know, we're making sure the conversation continues and that we're not sweeping this under the rug because it's too hard, because that's not healthy for us either. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to at Story by Giancarlo on Instagram. He's a writer that, you know, did respond to our question, just sort of putting it out there, asking people what they think we should review. And, you know, this was, I think, right before, if not right when the information had come out about Adam. So it was a very helpful story to hear about. And that's at Story by Giancarlo, Jankarlo on Instagram. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. I'm not from, you know, Dallas, so I don't think I knew the story very well because it happened before I was born and it happened in a state that I'm not from. But I'm sure people from Texas or Dallas or Fort Worth,
I think the southwest region probably might know it.
Yeah, maybe some people who were older will know it too. I don't think my family was here in 1973, so my family hadn't come to this country yet, so we probably wouldn't know this story either. So, but any of the anybody who fits into either of those demographics, you might have heard of this story. I'm going to share a story about Santos Rodriguez. Santos Rodriguez. He was born on November 7th, 1960, and was the child of Bessie Garcia and David Rodriguez. Santos kind of grew up in an area of Dallas, Texas, that was kind of called Little Mexico, and it was during a time where, you know, the Mexican community was just starting to move there, and so there weren't very many Mexican American people at the time, but the population was starting to grow, and there were certainly at that time more and more people like buying houses and stuff like that. So there was definitely what we know now as the Mexican community in Dallas, that was starting to flourish at that time. His mother, Bessie Gracie Rodriguez, at the time of his death, she was serving a 5-year prison term for, unfortunately, she had been involved in a murder for her boyfriend, Leonard Brown. Really not clear on the details of that murder, but we know that he was shot several times in his car where he was seen arguing with her. So Santos and his brother David, they were placed in the home of Carlos Mines, who had helped care for Bessie during her childhood, was kind of seen as a father figure for Bessie, so it was kind of like his grandfather. Okay. He definitely was referred to as, like, Bessie referred to him as dad, the kids referred to him as grandpa. And, the mother had requested that Mines take care of Santos and David while she was in jail. Okay. Now, the 3 youngest children, Ruben, Robert, and Juanita, they unfortunately had to be placed in foster homes during this time. Okay. So we know that Santos was, kind of by all of these other social markers, was kind of in one of those vulnerable states of going to be involved now in some stuff that maybe wasn't great. But because all humans are born great, he was also a wonderful person. Yes, he had been in a little bit of trouble, but for the most part, it was kind of like shoplifting stuff with the law. That was pretty much it for him, but was known in the neighborhood by the cops for his run-ins with shoplifting and stuff like that. He was also known to help around in the community center where he played soccer, and that's where he hung out with his friends. His teachers reported that he was into classical music. They considered him sort of like a naive child that was sort of like easy to like manipulate or whatever. Like,
what 12-year-old is not?
Like every 12-year-old, yeah. Also later named the community center after him, which was really beautiful. Okay. And as a person who is involved in that work, yeah. Is like, that's just a really wonderful way to honor a child who meant something to the community and really kind of exhibited the mission of the community center. So that's really great. So on July 24th, 1973, this is sort of the day of his tragic death, officers said that Patrolman Roy Arnold spotted a burglary at a North Dallas gas station shortly before 3 a.m. The police said that Patrol Arnold had seen several youths. This is a quote from the New York Times article in 1973 where the word youths is used.
Youths?
The youths. That's like mad racist.
My cousin Vinny.
Yeah, it's too much. So seen several youths running from behind the station. 2 other patrolmen responded to Patrolman Arnold's call for the assistance, and they were identified as Patrolman Kane and Patrolman J.W. Foster. The police said that Patrolman Arnold had recognized the youths, but lost them in a foot race in the darkness. So we already know that it was obviously the dead of night, and they, he claims he saw them, that he knew that it was them, but that he tried to chase them and that he lost them. But he claims that he knew that it was, those boys. So, Santos and David.
How you know for sure?
Well, I know he didn't. So, we'll get to that in a second. The police said that Foster and the other patrolman had gone to the Rodriguez boys' home. They claim that they had received permission from the grandfather who they lived with, and they then they returned them to the gas station for questioning. But from interviews that we later see from the mom, of all these resources I've linked in the episode notes, and you'll see many of them are from essentially like news reports. So we have like the actual news report from the New York Times, and then we have like CBS, Dallas morning show stuff, and we'll have some more recent stuff up from the mother actually recalling her understanding of the story, because of course she wasn't around, but she knew what happened because she spoke to her other son, her surviving son David, who told her what was going on, and her father, her adoptive father, who also communicated to her what happened. So in her interviews, she's basically saying that her father, or the child's grandfather, he was trying to figure out what was going on, because it was the middle of the night. They came to the house. They're trying to, pull the boys from the house, take them. He's like, where are you taking them? What's going on? So how is it that you said you got permission to take them, but the grandfather doesn't even know where you're taking them and what's going on? So that's interesting.
Curious. I don't know. Does he speak English? Is he a native English speaker, or?
I'm unclear. By the time that all of this sort of, because these reports that I was seeing were 40 years later.
Yeah.
So he might not have been around, but the mom was, and she was in her 80s, so she was able to recall what she remembered, and she was able to quote what her other son had communicated to her.
Okay.
So the police says that the boys had been handcuffed and placed in a patrol car, with Santos Rodriguez seated in the front seat beside Patrolman Arnold, and then they had also sat Patrolman Kane in the back seat. Patrolman Kane was directly behind Santos, and he was seated next to David. Santos's brother, who was behind Patrolman Arnold. Patrolman Kane at this point had 5 years with the police department. So the police said that the boys refused to answer questions regarding the burglary, and that Kane, at this point, the one who is seated behind Santos, pulls out his pistol and pointed it in the back of Santos's head to force, a confession. That's his claim. Of course, he didn't say to force a confession, but of course that's what that is. So the police said that the patrolman was leaning forward when his .357 Magnum went off, and of course striking the child in the head. Santos's brother later reported that that's actually false, and that it was clear that there was a game of Russian roulette that was happening in the patrol car, which is, I just want to be clear, really triggering for me, and you know why. So, and this is just like, I just want to put this out, just in general for people of color, like having to relive violence this way, and knowing that we know people we love that have, dealt with this kind of violence. I'm just, I don't want to share too many details because my family is very private about a lot of things, but, my family does have a history with this violent game called Russian roulette, and we did lose someone to that, and it's not, it's unfortunate that, we deal with the consequences of gun violence at the level that we do, and that we are triggered this way, and we have to relive our trauma on many different levels, and how very personal these stories can get, in addition to, just you seeing that these people are just like you, you're also reliving what has happened to you and what has happened to your family or what has happened to your ancestors. So a game, Russian roulette is a game, for those who don't know, a game where it's a specific type of gun you have to have. It's the type
revolver.
Yeah, the gun has to have a revolver. So you are it's a kind of gun where the place where the bullets go this is going to be this is a kindergartner's example of this because I'm not very well versed in guns, but where the place where the bullets go, you can pop that out and just put the bullets in one by one in sort of a circular revolver situation. And in this case, you put the bullets like sort of randomly, or maybe you just put one bullet randomly, and then you spin it and then close it where you don't see where the bullet is. And then what happens, of course, is a very frightening and very traumatic situation where the gun is either you put the gun on your own head or someone else puts the gun on your head, and you basically start clicking off rounds, and it's in some ways it's like a game where it's like a sort of like a game of chicken, sort of, where like the winner is the person who didn't stop the game, but also that can be the loser because you can inadvertently get shot in the head. In this case, this was being used, of course, as a fear tactic to, elicit a confession from two children. Who?
How old was
He was 13.
So David was older.
David was 13 and Santos was 12.
Okay.
And because sitting in what was happening in that car is just crazy. And I just want to be clear, like, the burglary that took place, it was $8 worth of cigarettes. Or I don't know if it was cigarettes that they took, but they took $8 from the machine. It was a cigarette machine, and they took $8 from it. Someone did. It was clear that it wasn't the boys, and I'll get to why I think that in a minute.
So like this officer is essentially going between David and Santos, alternating in terms of like, or was it just like the first? Do we know how long this game was going on? Did David?
Not very long.
Okay. Okay.
So David reports that he shot once, and the first shot didn't have a bullet, and then he threatened, this time I have a live bullet, and that's gonna kill you. And then he shoots, and the boys again in fear just say, no, we didn't take the money, we weren't even at the gas station. And Kane shoots Santos, and obviously a point blank range, and while the child is handcuffed in the police vehicle, and he dies. So the ambulance arrives, and they first checked on the police officer, who was on his knees in distress outside of the vehicle. David reported...
The motherfucker who shot a 12-year-old is in distress?
Yeah.
Fuck you.
So David reported... This is the stuff that, like, it's, like, really emotional for me, just because I can really empathize with the feeling of horror on David's part. Just a 13-year-old boy sitting in a car, handcuffed, having just witnessed his brother die. David reported that he was essentially, what felt like 30 minutes for him. He was just sitting there in the car, and his brother's blood. I'm not a journalist, guys, so I'm not gonna not be, like, human about this. I feel this is very traumatizing and awful for a child to go through. he'd been in there long enough for his brother. His brother was seated in the front seat, and it was diagonal in a seat diagonal to his. And at some point, blood got to his shoes. So it was on his feet. And he was able to report that that was his experience. That's how long he was bleeding out. So the other thing I wanted to sort of mention about Patrolman Kane, which I also think is relevant to the conversation, because we find that these officers that commit these crimes, they often have a history of violence, of excessive force, or in many cases, they've already killed someone else and gotten away with it. And 2 years prior to this particular incident, I want to be clear that, like, Kane had only been a patrolman for 5 years, which means when he was just on the force for 3 years, he had killed someone else. It was an 18-year-old Michael Moorhead in April of 1970, and that was actually 3 years. So yeah, so he was only on the force for 2 years when he killed him. Sorry about that. The youth, I guess so they quote it. So Michael Moorhead, along with his brother, sound familiar, was surprised by police standing outside of a grill following a burglary. He was killed by a 13-shot volley fired by patrolman Kane and Kirksey. So, this is Michael Moorhead, who was just an 18-year-old child, was shot 13. I don't know how many bullets actually hit him, but there were 13 shots fired at him by Kane and his partner. So he already had a history of this kind of behavior, and I don't have the details of what Michael Moorhead's death looked like, but there was enough of a wrongful feeling there that the family moved forward with legal action. Unfortunately, a grand jury did not return an indictment against him for that case. So he continued on the force. And he killed again.
Yeah.
Maliciously. With intent.
About, white. Yeah.
Sounds about white. So this is interesting because it's just another, this is another cop, a retired officer, Robert Rowe. He's just sort of recalling the situation. And he says, the call on the radio says, I think it was Officer Arnold that came on the radio very quickly, excitedly said, "We've got a boy that's been accidentally shot, and he looks in bad shape." Which, I mean, he instantly died in that moment. They must have known he was dead. So Rowe, actually, he's hearing this over the radio. He's close enough to be one of the first responders. So he arrives to the scene, and he describes, "I saw the boy laying in the back seat, all bloody. His brother was in the front seat, and both of them were handcuffed. There was an officer down on his knees. I found out later it was Kane. He had thrown up and was on his knees crying." I just want to be clear that another thing that was reported was that the boys were found in their pajamas. So this, to me, obviously is not definitive evidence, but is definitely enough to have me question whether they were really involved in this situation, because they had to be pulled from their homes and they were in their pajamas, and it didn't even seem like they questioned the grandfather at all, because the grandfather could have easily been able to tell if they'd been home or not. And they I don't know that they asked anybody anything. And the boys...
What time was this happening again?
It was 3 a.m.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Like as we say, guys, history repeats itself so much, and it's so crazy. But yeah.
Yeah.
Or they have an MO.
There's an MO. It's almost the same every time.
Yeah.
It's like they don't follow procedure. They have a history of excessive force or even murder, and or several complaints against them, and when they're alone with in this case, they weren't alone, but when they isolate the person and they don't follow through with any of the protocol.
Yeah. And in this case, it's just an excessive abuse of power in every single way. Like, so from the fact that you just went to their house, pulled them out of their home without a parent or guardian, didn't tell the guardian what was happening, and then you didn't take them to the police station for questioning or anything. No, you took them. You did the scare tactic that, from, if he's to be believed, he didn't really think would happen. What the fuck did you think was gonna happen if you had a goddamn bullet in a whatever? I'm so angry.
No, yeah. So I don't know why he was surprised. I don't know what he thought was gonna happen. Or is it just like white? There's like a weird confidence with white people that's almost unrealistic sometimes. Where it's just like, yeah, because you've set up the odds to benefit you so often that you forgot to some extent that this shit is real and that it's not a game. And that it's not, you can't bend reality to your will all the time. Like, and in this moment, he realized, like, oh, shit, I really shot him. And then...
It tells me that this wasn't the first time they did this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yes. They definitely had done that before, and it seemed like that was just a regular practice, and he got lucky so many times that he thought he could just get away with that, or that was just legitimate practice.
Like you said, it's a game of chicken, right? So, like, usually the people confess or, say something.
Well, and but that's how you get a ton of false confessions, too.
Exactly. Now, I'm waiting to hear the fallout of all of this. Hopefully, I know.
You already know. Why are we doing this? I'll tell you what it was.
To me now, I'm like, I would question every single case this man did in his short tenure. Like, anybody who came in with a confession, that you brought in with a confession, I'm like, no, throw that shit out.
Arguably, that should be the practice, right? If any, like, officer, detective, whatever, because this system is so fucking corrupt, at all, that should be one of the main, things. I mean, I don't know. Let's not get into the whole reform. Well, we're probably gonna get into the reform conversation, and y'all don't want to hear what I think about it. But the truth is, anytime, from a moral standpoint, anytime it is found that, a detective or whatever forced one confession,
any sort of law enforcement,
right? That it should be looked at, like, everything you've done your entire career should be looked at to just make sure every confession you got was legitimate. The same thing with a judge. If it's seen that a judge has a bias or something, or if you can prove, like, whatever, if a judge has a mistrial for whatever reason, it should be looked at in their whole history. Are there cases like this where a similar ruling was made or whatever under similar circumstances where there could have been a bias or whatever the situation is? I don't know all the lingo, but it's a similar situation where, it's completely under, it's whiteness at its best. Even whiteness cannot hold itself accountable. And when it does hold itself accountable, it's mediocre. That's the whole fucking business plan. That's how it's set up. It's mediocrity. It's mediocre, decision after mediocre decision after mediocre decision, all to uphold whiteness. Mm-hmm. It's disgusting. It's fucking sick.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the fallout that happened, after.
So when, obviously this has happened many years ago. So like a whole 40 years after that, when Dallas in 2013, the mayor issued an official apology, which was like, thanks, you know.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, you know where to take your apology and where to put it. Okay. Kane was eventually convicted of murder. It was within the time frame. It wasn't 40 years later. It was within the time frame.
I know the statute of limitations.
Yeah. And he was sentenced to 5 years.
Oh.
Oh no, I'm not done. But he was released after 2.5 years.
I figured.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they waited 2.5 years.
Yeah. And he died in 2019, and there was no mention of his police work in his obituary, which I guess is what accountability looks like for a white man. I don't know why that's not enough.
Live out the rest of his. I'm sure he was paid out. I'm sure he was given.
Even if he wasn't, who fucking cares? Like, how is that enough? Like, you should be in jail. His mom did more time for whatever her situation was, which who knows what the details behind her story is, because I couldn't find more details for her. All I could find was how, the New York Times felt it was necessary to tell me that she was in jail for killing someone. Of course. Why did I need to know that?
That is, again, it's part of the whole system, right? Where now all of a sudden, like, no, we're actually going to make sure we're going to dig deep into the victim's life. And we're going to find out every fucking skeleton in your goddamn closet, your family, everybody. Oh, your mom's in jail? Yeah, that attributes to the fact that, yep, you definitely stole $8 worth of whatever the fuck from a vending machine.
$8. This child was horrifically
and I'm still very confused as to, like,
I can't...
how you knew it was specifically these two kids. Like, what the... You know every fucking kid? And
not only that, but, like, let's be real, because we've both been through these situations. They didn't care.
Yeah.
They didn't care. They decided it was those two kids. And that's what they were going to move with. Period.
Yeah.
They've ran into problems with these kids before. These kids are easy targets. Maybe they usually confess to this kind of thing. Because they did seem, again, like, genuinely, like, good kids that were just, like, doing not great, like, making not great choices. And... okay, they maybe shoplifted a few times, and they knew them already because they probably been through this with them. So he probably did. This will be an easy confession. We'll get it over with, whatever. These kids are pretty easy to scare. And then they went the route that they went. And it doesn't matter who their faces are. It doesn't matter who they really are. It doesn't matter if you really saw them. Mm-hmm. It's just check off the box. These people are like false confession machines. And again, it's a ladder, so they do it to anybody. I mean, we saw Making a Murderer. Making a Murderer is a good example of, like, when you don't have a person of color there, let's pick, like, the poorer people, the poorer person, or the person with the disability, or like whatever, or the child with the disability, or whatever, So it's a ladder, so it exists for a reason, and in this case, I think they weren't sure, this Arnold person, this patrolman Arnold, I don't think he was sure that obviously it was them. I think he assumed that it was them because that would be easy for him. And, to date, we don't have any confirmation of that. And you want to know why? Because it was $8 from a vending machine and nobody fucking cares. And you killed somebody for that.
I'm like, no, it wasn't easy. I mean, what would have been easy? For him to fucking just move on.
Yeah.
Like they
move the fuck up.
Kept it moving. Like, but you know what? It was I know why. Because they made it personal. Or the fact that they try to chase these kids down, whoever these kids were. Mm-hmm. And they got away.
Right.
So now there's nothing more dangerous than an angry white man with a bruised ego.
Jesus. You're 100% right about that. And it's actually really scary. And I can tell you I've made the conscious decision around a white man with a bruised ego to make sure that he feels okay for my safety. 100%. 100%. No, matter of fact, I think I've probably done that for, like, men in general. Well, yeah. Because I've done that for men of color for my safety. Okay, so the so there was this NPR article that talked about this, and so I want to get into the details of it. So there were many protests and riots that took place in response to what happened, and that's what led to some changes. Obviously, one of them being Kane's eventual conviction.
Let me guess. They also did training, bias training.
No, even better. I got you. Hold on, I got you. The one of the things that NPR reported so positively that made me a little mad at NPR because NPR could do better than this. And it was reported on the podcast Code Switch, their page, and I was just kind of like, Code Switch. I know y'all didn't write this. I know somebody else in NPR wrote this and just smacked it on your page. Some white person was like, put this on the Code Switch page. I think they'll like that.
Code Switch is a pretty good podcast.
It's such a good show. I recommend it. But yeah, they claims that things were improved after this incident because more Mexican Americans or Latinos in general, kind of started to join the police force. So let's talk about that for a second. No, we have to talk about it, and it's important for me to talk about this. Yeah. We know that it does help. Diversity, of course, helps. We know this. It's not really the overarching solution. Of course, there's not one solution to this issue, but that's not the main, most effective solution. While, of course, we want to encourage as much diversity as possible, please, whatever you want to be, you should be. Doesn't matter what you look like or where you come from or blah, blah, blah. But what the real change is in all these police brutality situations, what the real change that's needed in these situations on all levels, really, I'm talking about from legislation to elected officials to judges to the court system to the criminal justice system to the police officers that are executing people. It's just real accountability. And not in response to protests and riots. Not in response to media attention. Real accountability. Rules that apply to everybody. And real systems that hold themselves accountable or have, branches that hold them accountable. In response to what is morally correct. Because we can make up a whole bunch of laws, and we know that what is law is not always morally correct. Mm-hmm. And so while I appreciate the idea that more Latinos or people of color in general should be, in situations where we are being policed, we have seen time and again situations where there are, Latinos or other people of color as police officers who themselves are either causing harm to people and being themselves the brutal police officers or standing by while brutality is taking place. Mm-hmm. So we know, if we're just going off recent stuff, we know that Carron Nazario was the latest black victim to a violent traffic stop. He's a Latino who... Mm-hmm. A human. How about this? He is a human who happens to be both Latino and black. Mm-hmm. And he was the victim of a violent traffic stop. Thankfully, did not end in his death. But he was attacked, and he was, maced, I think, for no reason. And he communicated that he was afraid to get out because of the violence that was coming at him and the energy that he was feeling during this traffic stop. And the person that pulled him over was a Latino. was a light-skinned Latino. Dare I say white Latino.
White Latino.
Who pulled him over, and what he said to him, you should be scared. He knew he was enacting an act of violence upon him. And was deliberately participating in that fear tactic. And this man is a lieutenant, I think, in the U.S. Army or something like that. I don't do well with the types of military. So I apologize to Mr. Carron, Mr. Nasario, if I have misrepresented your title. And, you know, he said, he's in his fatigues. Honestly, I think him being in his fatigues saved his life.
Yeah.
I don't know if he would have made it out that traffic stop. He got maced in his fatigues.
Yeah. They fired the police officer.
Yeah.
Again, interesting, happens to be Latino. Of course, they fire his ass.
Yeah.
And it goes to show, like, yo, you white until you're not white, okay? For you white Latinos, sorry.
Nah, I mean, it's again, it depends on where you're at in the spectrum, right? Because you might just be at a place where you're like, no, I'm not white because I'm in the same struggle as you, and we have similar struggles, right? I'm speaking to you as your resident white Latina. Do I identify as white? Obviously not. That's crazy. But I do know I have white privilege, so let's all just relax a little bit. I know that I'm not getting shot at a traffic stop. Period. Let's just move forward. Let's just keep it moving. I'm not getting shot at a traffic stop. I'm not afraid. I would not be screaming outside of a car. I'm afraid to get out. Matter of fact, I've had instances where I have been pulled over at like random DUI stuff, and I'm just like, "What is this? Are you guys serious?" And of course the cop wasn't nice to me, because he saw me, he knew I wasn't a white woman, so he wasn't nice about it, and he tried to breathalyze me anyway. But besides being treated rudely, I got through that situation. So that's not the same as getting shot at a traffic stop.
Yeah.
Let's stop. Full stop. Okay? And I think, there have been other situations where we know that there were other people of color that were police officers there when George Floyd was killed, and didn't do enough to stop it. We know, I think the person that has shot Philando Castile was Latino as well.
There was another instance of this. Actually, the same year that George Floyd was murdered, a Latino man was actually murdered in the same fashion, through an illegal chokehold and asphyxiation. Antonio Valenzuela in the Southwest as well, by a white Latino, Christopher Smearsley. And when you look at a picture of Christopher, there's reason why there's no question as to why he feels empowered to act this way. But he's also standing trial. It was interesting about this. There's so many parallels in this case with George Floyd's. Valenzuela was also asphyxiated. I don't think for that, for the same amount of time. I think George Floyd case is unique in that case, in that sense. But it later turned out, after the fact, that they found methamphetamine in his system. And same thing that, as George Floyd, they found drugs in his system. And I'm like, oh, so now we're just finding drugs in everybody's system.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to hear it. I'm not trying to hear that. Because whether somebody, again, you could have drugs in your systems, you could not. The bottom line, we're not getting distracted. Like, This is the issue. Like, let's stop this conversation where, dead in its tracks. Stop engaging. This is for this particular message is not for the people who believe that we should have conversations about whether or not people had drug in their systems or whether they belonged out in the streets at that time or whether their mother was being a good enough mother. I'm talking to the people who engage in the back and forth when someone says something like that and you want to help them understand or just, lay things out. We're not getting caught up in the social circumstances that cause anyone to involve themselves in drugs. We're not getting caught up in the social circumstances that cause, the family disruptions that we deal with and why we see different family dynamics that might, cause a child to find themselves out in the streets at 3 a.m. That is not the conversation that we're having. Because it's not against the law to be outside at 3 a.m. It's not against the law to be even a bad parent. Sorry to tell you about that. There are very specific things about parenting that are against the law, and you gotta, even then, it's just connected to social services most of the time. Mm-hmm. So it's not against while it is against the law to do drugs, the penalty for doing drugs is not
your life.
Death. The penalty for being a bad parent is not death, or the death of your child.
Shouldn't the penalty for you being a dumb kid out doing maybe dumb shit is not for you to get
and we don't. And just to be clear, we don't. Right,
they're supposed to protect us,
and
allegedly.
We don't live in a world where that's the law. It's not like it's Terminator, and we have robot cops in the street. And the law is they shoot you because you're outside at that time. That's not how that works. So just stop the conversation when we start getting into having to defend people's lifestyles. We're not doing that because it's not relevant to the conversation. The conversation is the law enforcement's responsibility is not judge, jury, and executioner. They handcuff you. And they take you somewhere where someone else processes that. Mm-hmm. That's it. And then they clock out for their shift. Okay?
Yeah.
They write up their little reports. And they show up in court when they're asked to. That's their job. Okay?
Yeah.
Also, just for the record, I saw a great meme, or not meme, I shouldn't say that. I saw a tweet that I really liked that said, why are we even pulling people over for traffic tickets anymore? Like, just send somebody their shit in the mail. Right now, a camera could fucking do that job. Yeah. Your taillight is out, send that shit in the mail. And if your city doesn't have the infrastructure to have that shit done via a camera, the officer can just note it themselves.
Yeah.
And just take your license plate down, and you could get your ticket in the mail. We don't need to. Why do we have armed officers? Why you need a gun to give somebody a ticket for a taillight? Waste my time. I don't understand. It doesn't. Stop it. Just stop.
And if your argument to that is like, oh, well, there's people who pull out guns on cops. Okay, so don't engage. It goes back to the same thing that we were talking about. Don't stop pulling people over for stupid shit. Stop doing traffic stops. If it is such a dangerous situation, don't engage and just send the ticket through mail.
Yeah.
But.
And I also recently learned that there's like a nice handful of places, like countries, not like obviously it's not a majority of countries throughout the world, but it's a good amount of developed countries that have officers that, like, by standard don't actually have, like, weapons on them.
Yeah, they
don't have guns.
They don't carry guns.
And they, like, if you need somebody who has a gun, that's a different level. And those people get called in separately. But, like, not all cops are walking around with guns because it's fucking unnecessary. And very few situations call for it.
Yeah.
And those are also places where there's like proper gun control, right? where not everybody's just fucking walking around in Walmart with it. Let me stop.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you. This is a Red Nut Stressful Conversation. I appreciate if you've made it this far into this conversation. I appreciate you. I love you. Please go and take some time, to do what you need to do to get through this in a way that's healthy. If you're still struggling with this, I'm also sending my love. I'm also sending you healing vibes and positive energy, because it is a difficult time and it's a lot to deal with. And yeah, you may know cops that are great. Yeah, you may have cops that are in your family. Yeah, whatever. You might have an understanding that cops are important to our lives in many ways. And all of that may be true for you. And there can be multiple truths. Okay? And so I hope you're dealing with that okay. I hope you're processing that okay. I hope it's not really stressing you out, and that you're actually, as best as you can, trying to process the information that's being given, because it's important to really think about it. It's important to really process it, and it's important to challenge the ideas that we have. I love you all. Have a wonderful whatever time of day it is for you. And peace out.
Bye, everybody.
Ha home. See you soon. Follow us on social media. You can follow our podcast at AFACPod. That's at AFAAK Pod. Or follow our hosts, Minerva at It's Minerva Angel and at Fredo_B on Twitter.